From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Rhode Islanders know him best as the imposing figure from the state police who collared mobsters and eventually rose to the top of the ranks. Now they are about to learn who Brendan Doherty is outside the signature black and red uniform. Though high profile, the Republican challenger to Congressman David Cicilline is a relative unknown politically until today. Where does Doherty stand on the big issues, such as taxes, Social Security and Medicare, or war with Iran? This week on Newsmakers, in his first in-depth television interview as a candidate to represent Rhode Island's 1st Congressional District, our guest, Brendan Doherty. Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi and political reporter from Rhode Island Public Radio, Ian Donis. Good morning, everyone. And good morning, Colonel. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.
Let's start first with a basic question. Why do you want to be a member of the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, let me just tell you, I've been involved in public service most of my adult life, and when I decided to retire from the state police back in March of last year, I decided I wanted to continue that public service. I think Rhode Island needs a stronger voice here in Rhode Island and needs a stronger voice in Washington. I believe we need stronger voices in Congress, and I think that I've demonstrated that I stand up to do the right things, have stood up to do the right things throughout my career, and I'm really committed to this. I really believe I'm doing it and running in the best interest of the people of the state of Rhode Island. I believe when I get to Washington, I will do just what I've done for my entire career: stand up in tough issues. And that means I might not always be in step with my party on those issues. I'll be acting in the best interest of the people of the state of Rhode Island. I'm committed to that. I have been through my whole career.
You might not be in step with your party the whole time, but you did decide to become a Republican. Why?
I am Republican. I'm a conservative values. I'm conservative, fiscally conservative. I've spoken so much throughout the years about, when I ran the state police and I ran the Department of Public Safety, I wanted to do that efficiently so it didn't cost the taxpayers any more than what it should have. And I could talk about fiscal responsibility. Let me tell you a quick story. When I came back as superintendent of the state police, and for your viewers, I had retired for a couple of years, as you all know, and went into, I was an adjunct professor at Roger Williams University and the director of public safety. And when I came back, Governor Kucheri asked me to come back as superintendent. I came to realize that the new building that the taxpayers allotted the state police $40 million to build, the cost had skyrocketed. It was up close to 70 million, some said over 70 million. No one was taking responsibility for that. When I took over, I needed to stop that project, to take responsibility, because I'm fiscally responsible. I wasn't going to go back to the taxpayers and tell them that, hey, we just decided to use $30 million of your money. So I built that building on time, on budget, on state land for $27 million, state of the art, just what they needed. I had to value engineer it, but we were in tough times. So I talk about that during my campaign while I'm traveling throughout the district, about fiscal responsibility. I don't always see that in the federal government. So that's one of the things I'll be looking at and talking about.
We know some voters in the 1st Congressional District are unhappy with your opponent, Democrat David Cicilline, but they might also be concerned about offering more support for the Republican leadership in Congress. You say you're not going to march in lockstep with the leadership. Are you saying there's actually a shred of a chance you might vote for Democrat Nancy Pelosi as majority leader?
No, I wouldn't vote for Nancy Pelosi as majority leader, but I won't. Listen, I'll look at every bill that comes before me with common sense and take a prudent approach to it. So I'm my own man, and I'm not going to Washington to be part of the good old boy network. I've demonstrated that through my career. I've stood up in tough times when it's not always popular. But no, I will not vote for Nancy Pelosi.
Would you vote for John Boehner as Speaker of the House?
It depends who comes before, who was the candidate for Speaker of the House at that time.
Will it be a Republican? Is that who you're going to cast your vote for?
Most likely, yes. I'll be a Republican candidate, so yes, it will most likely be a Republican.
I want to ask you about some of the policies that you'll be asked to vote on there. All the Bush tax cuts expire at the end of this year. Congressman Cicilline says he'll vote only to extend those for those who make $250,000 or less. What's your position?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of that.
Congressman Cicilline has said he'll only vote to extend the Bush tax cuts for households that make $250,000 or less. What's your position on when the Bush tax cuts expire? What should be done?
Well, when the Bush tax cuts expire, that's only going to affect the people making under $250, correct?
No, because it will. There's a whole set of them, and some of them are for those who make less than that. Some of them are for those who make more, and that's been the primary question at this point, I suppose, because it adds so much to future deficits if you extend them all.
Right. So we should. I believe the Bush tax cuts they're going to expire in 2013. I believe they should expire.
All of them.
All of them. Across the board.
Across the board.
And a lot of those Bush tax cuts will include, help me out, $1,000 child tax credit.
Child tax credit.
For middle class.
Let me just say this: we'll have a new Congress in 2013, so we should review all this. The Bush tax cuts. I wouldn't be opposed to extending them for a short period of time until a new Congress can look at it. So I would say if we extended them for 3 months, then a Republican new Congress could look at it. And I think that what we find is that a lot of them would end up being allowed to expire.
So you think revenue has to be looked at as part of how we deal with the long-term deficit problem that we're facing in the federal budget? You think, of course, spending cuts are going to be part of it, but tax revenue has to be part of it too?
Yeah, but we can create tax revenue through tax reform and this Byzantine tax code we have. I've been talking about this and throughout my trips to businesses in the First District. There's so many companies that are having difficulty hiring, especially in the First District, the people that I've been meeting with, having difficulty hiring new employees. They have the ability to do it, but there's no consistency. So we need tax reform. We all know we need tax reform. It's a bipartisan issue that we have to deal with. So some of those tax, whether it's the Bush tax cuts or some of these tax loopholes, we need to cut the tax loopholes out. We need to reform our corporate tax code. We need to look at our, I'm sorry, we need to reform our tax code. We need to look at our corporate tax. It's 35%. It's one of the highest in the world. We need to bring that down to around 22, 25% to allow our American businesses to use that money to grow jobs. And then there's other things I'll be talking about later on to repatriate and bring some of the estimated $1.4 trillion overseas back to our country to help stimulate our economy, to bring jobs to Rhode Island, help bring jobs to the First District.
Well, specifically on the tax question, there's the one thing being bounced around down in Washington is the so-called Buffett rule. It would require very high income earners, those making $1 million a year or more, to pay at least 30% of their income in federal tax. Do you support it or oppose it?
Well, first of all, Warren Buffett did very well by that system. The new one is just a new AMT. It's just an AMT for the middle class, and that's just a hidden tax for the middle class. I believe we need to support the middle class. We need tax reform across the board, not just something that's sexy to hear like the Warren Buffett rule. He paid less taxes percentage-wise than his secretary because he probably paid just as much money in accountants and CPAs to take care of his taxes.
Probably not
well.
as much in accountants than he got in tax cuts.
But it's paid less because his earnings are from investment income.
Right, investment income. So that's something we need to take a look at. But I don't want to see a bill we take one blanket shot at that, which will hurt the middle class.
So,
it's a hidden tax.
All of this dovetails into the deficit that Ted talked about, and I'm wondering how then you would tackle the deficit. What specifically would you cut? And please do not say waste and fraud, which is something that everyone always brings up, but really is a drop in the fiscal bucket. What programs would you cut specifically to shrink the deficit?
We need to look at all the programs. We need to reboot America and put everything on the table. And I was going to mention fraud and tax, fraud and waste, because there's some pieces of that I will talk about. Because look, we've had a tremendous amount of waste in federal government. But we need to put everything on the table and assess that the needs that we have people that are gaming the system. That comes back to what you're talking about. We have $60 billion in 2010 in Medicare fraud. These are things I will be talking about during the campaign. But to answer your question directly, we need to put everything on the table, and we need to reboot America.
Entitlement programs on the table?
Sure, we need to look at it. We need to look at everything.
President Obama this week scolded Republicans for being, in his view, too eager to get into a war with Iran. What is your criteria for deciding whether the U.S. should attack Iran?
Well, let me tell you, we need to continue to use smart power and soft power with Ahmadinejad and the Iranian initiative to create a nuclear bomb. If we think that that's exactly what they're doing, and I'm hoping that our intelligence community has exacted that information. I'm sure they have, and they haven't shared that, and that's the way it should be. But we cannot allow Iran to have a bomb. I spent time in Israel. I studied counterterrorism in Israel for a week, and I traveled from the Golan Heights down to the Gaza Strip, and I remember sitting with a young boy up in the Golan Heights and talking to him about his lifestyle. These kids grow up differently than we did here. We have a lot more security here. We're free to walk down the street.
You're saying that if Iran is on the precipice of developing a nuclear weapon, the U.S. should attack? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that we need to support the people of Israel, our biggest allies, our strongest allies in the Middle East. I'm a big supporter of Israel, and that's what we need to do.
Could you see Congressman Doherty voting to bomb Iran? Could it ever get to
I can't give you a hypothetical, but I can tell you this, that if I was on the committee, I would vote to support Israel in any measure that we had to. I don't think that boots on the ground would be good for us, but we need to support the people of Israel.
You've said you want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, health reform, whatever people want to call it at this point. But even if that happens, that won't fix our health care cost problem in America. That's a huge driver of deficits. What do you do after the Affordable Care Act gets repealed? What do you want to see happen to try to tackle this health care issue that's squeezing so many families?
Well, first of all, Obamacare was a partisan bill that was just pushed through and pushed down the throats of Congress. I believe we need a bipartisan solution to this. We need to go back, and like I use the term reboot, we need to reboot this issue. There are companies out there. If you travel through Rhode Island or through the 1st District like I do, and you talk to business owners, and you sit down with them, they're afraid of Obamacare. They don't understand it yet. They don't understand how the exchange program will work, what the cost would be to them. It's a job impediment right now, job growth impediment. To answer your question, I think we need a bipartisan solution, people to sit down at the table to find common ground to fix this. President Obama and this administration have addressed the delivery of the service, but not the cost. It's going to be a great cost, and with the debt that we have.
With respect, Colonel, though, listening to Republicans in Washington, they have said very explicitly, Mitch McConnell, that it's not good to have bipartisan bills because that muddies the issue for voters. They don't understand that there's a difference between the parties. What makes you think that that's going to be what a Congress wants to do in 2013?
Well, I can only speak for myself and my past experiences. I'm able to sit down at a table like this, and we may not all agree on the issues, but I could sit here and we'd come up with solutions to problems. Matter of fact, maybe we could come up with a solution to help
right on Newsmakers, yeah.
But let me just tell you, there's electronic medical records, something that I'm just shocked that we don't have already nationwide. We need to look at the delivery of service, the quality, and the cost, and what are pushing these costs. That's the issue, and we need to review that.
Colonel, and by the way, Congressman Kennedy was a big proponent of the electronic medical records. We do have to go to a break, but specifically, since we're talking health care, and I want to wrap this up, are there elements of that law that you like? One popular aspect is allowing dependents 25 years and under to collect health insurance under mom and dad. Would you want to see them booted off health insurance by repealing the law? No,
I think that's fair right now. I know there's many families. It's difficult for some businesses right now because their costs have gone up. That's a cost driver. But that's fair, especially in this day and age when we have kids coming out of college and they're not able to find a job right now. That the job situation is just terrible right now. But we need to repeal it. You're asking if there are some good. Yeah, the exchanges are good. The competition is good. That's why there are pieces of it that are good, but we haven't addressed cost. We can't. It's just a massive document, and you know that most of Congress, or many of Congressmen women, didn't even read it. It was just passed through quickly. So why don't we sit down and find common sense solutions to these things? This is what we do in business every day. This is what I did as a Commissioner of Public Safety and the Colonel of State Police. When we need to look at whether we bought 40 new cars or whether we invested in E911, we could only look. I wouldn't just micromanage that. I'd listen to other people. Two heads are better than one. We should start another commission to look at it.
We're going to take a break here on the program. Our guest this week is Republican candidate for Congress, Brendan Doherty. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, and from Rhode Island Public Radio, Ian Donis. Our guest this week is Republican candidate for Congress, Brendan Doherty. Ian.
Colonel, the DREAM Act is a hotly debated issue in Rhode Island. It would offer in-state tuition for the children of undocumented immigrants. Do you support or oppose it?
You know, it's a very, very difficult topic because no one would want to push high school kids aside that want to go to college. But just on principle, if someone comes here illegally, they're here illegally. Now, what is the message we're sending for people in other countries if the state of Rhode Island will educate their children if they make it to Rhode Island? So no, I would oppose the DREAM Act in Rhode Island as it stands today.
Supporters of the issue say these children are already here, that helping them to get a better education is an investment in the state. You don't find that a convincing argument?
It's obviously a convincing argument. It's a very, very difficult situation, but we need to come up with a look, it goes back to the federal government. The federal government and our federal elected leaders have failed us in this issue about immigration, illegal immigration. We need to laud and applaud the hard work of our legal immigrant community. Came here the right way. They did the right thing. They're following the American dream. They built great businesses right here in Rhode Island, and we need to celebrate that. But if someone came here illegally, and let me tell you, there's people that come here illegally for two reasons. It's a bifurcated issue. You have people that come over because of the push and the pull, because they see it as a better way of life, but albeit they did it the wrong way. And then you have people who come here for nefarious reasons. They're here to prey on America, to game the system, to get involved with the social programs. Some are here to deal drugs. And you recall about a year ago when I was still superintendent of the state police, on my watch, we took down the largest monetary and cocaine seizure in the history of Rhode Island. Those people were here illegally. There was a lot of cocaine going out on the streets. That's what I was focusing on, criminal aliens. And then we have criminal re-entries that I could talk about if you want me to. It's a whole nother story. But getting back to that issue, it's a difficult situation. I feel the difficulties for those families because, look, I love children. I've spent many, many years coaching kids in the inner city, mentoring kids in the inner city, but we need to do things the right way. So we need to come up with some type of a program, not just a blanket opportunity to just go to school. What message does that send? What message is there for the guy who lives in another country that really wanted to come over to America, but he couldn't get here, and he could only get here illegally, and he didn't do it because he knew it was the wrong thing to do? What do we do for that guy and his family? It's just wrong.
When you're asked about Social Security, you always say that people on Social Security, and those about to go into Social Security, should be safe. What about those people 10 years out?
I really believe, first of all, let me speak to our seniors. Social Security is a difficult issue right now, but there are people, including my opponent, who send messages out to seniors that I want to take their Social Security away. Nothing further from the truth. Our seniors on Social Security collecting now should be safe. Our seniors about to go on should be safe. My mom is 85 years old. She lives off of Social Security. My in-laws live off of Social Security. They worked hard to get there. We made a social contract with our seniors, and we need to fulfill that.
But again,
now,
you sound like you couch the answer.
No, I will get to your question.
All right.
Now, down the road, we need to look at Social Security because we're actually just providing that benefit on the interest right now, and you know that will run out in, I believe, 2025. So we need to look down the road. There was I believe, some good talking points in the Simpson Bowles report. That was obviously rejected by Congress and by this administration. But they talk about it where, you know, let's come up with a cutoff point like 1960 or 1959. Those people it would take them another couple of weeks to get that benefit, and then it's just graduated. So it would be a few weeks by birth date. So when you say 10 years out, it could affect people 10 years out. but I think that they understand that we need to make Social Security sustainable. The people on it should be safe and should not have to worry about the threats of being taken off.
I want to ask you about something that's been in the news a lot the last couple weeks, which is, and I know you've talked about it, President Obama's policy on contraception and religious employers. The compromise he ended up making that not everyone's happy with says workers' insurance companies, even if they work for a religious employer, must provide free contraceptive coverage. What do you think of that issue and where it is at this point?
Well, first of all, it gets my comments position come back to my faith. As an article of my faith, I'm pro-life. I'm pro-life. Let me make that perfectly clear. As it relates to contraceptives, I believe it's an attack on the Catholic Church or any religion if government is going to dictate something to them that is incongruent to their beliefs. So, in that second piece of that, where there was a compromise, the Catholic Church, more often than not, in the hospitals, are self-insured. So they need to rework that because they're still forcing the Catholic Church to pay for contraceptives. And I'll tell you what, I believe it'll end up in court, and I believe the Catholic Church will be successful, or any religion that's attacked. I'm surprised that this administration has done that. So as it relates to contraceptives, that, and separate and apart from the Catholic Church, that's a decision between a man and a woman and their faith and their doctor.
If you're elected, would you vote to support laws that would reduce the number of abortions or reduce funding for abortions?
Well, those wouldn't come before me, Ian, and I'm not running for the United States Supreme Court. I'm not running to be become the Surgeon General.
Potentially be in the federal budget.
There could be something in the budget that would affect payments for. I would reject any payments for anything to do with abortion.
On jobless benefits, Senator Reid was involved in the conference committee to figure out a compromise on that. He wanted to continue them for 99 weeks in high unemployment states like Rhode Island. The Republicans wanted to push it down, he said, to 59. They compromised at 79 weeks. This is obviously a very fraught issue, especially in Rhode Island. What do you think is the right amount of time?
Would you say this is what kind of an issue?
Yeah, it's very fraught. It's very difficult for people here because there's so much unemployment. What do you think about
I think it was a reasonable solution. I think it's a good example of a bipartisan solution and finding common ground. We need more of that in this country. It's just too often we're just divided on both sides. We need to be able to come together. Listen, I was in Washington during the debt crisis situation and debate, I should say. And I was disappointed to see the vitriol attitudes on both sides regarding that. And I remember sitting in Washington at a meeting and I was watching a debate, and I remember thinking of the seniors back in Rhode Island, wondering if they're going to continue with their Social Security payments, and when these fellows just couldn't sit down, and then we had a super committee as a result of that, they weren't able to get together. I think what's going to happen this time, this is my prediction, that voters see this, they understand it, and I think the new Congress that you'll see will be people who can sit down at the table and be reasonable and find common sense solutions and understand the plight of the American people. Look, my family went from, my dad was a dentist, and we did well. But by the time I was a senior in high school, my dad became sick and didn't plan on being sick, didn't have insurance for being sick. So we did quite well, and we were poor overnight. Well, at that time, I was accepted to Bryant University. I couldn't give that bill to my parents. I could hear them, I could hear the anguish going on in private meetings between my mom and my dad, talking about bills and how they were going to lose the house. This all happened to us overnight. So I know what it's like to need, I know what it's like to want, I know what it's like to have to sit down and compromise. And sometimes you have to do that with our budget, our national budget. You have to do that in so many issues in government, and I'm prepared to do that. I think that's the type of person that we're going to be electing, and I think you cut me short, Tim, on waste, fraud, and corruption, but that's something I'll be talking a lot about.
Just because it is such a small portion of what the deficit is, I mean, that's an answer that everyone always brings up on the show, and it gets to be a little maddening.
I understand.
Cycle after cycle.
Exactly.
But let me tell you, I think it's a little bit bigger than what people think, because there's too much waste. There are issues out there that people don't even know about that I'll be shining a light on.
I know, though.
You know, we have 30 seconds. Can't let you go without getting your reaction on Louis Baby Shack Spinacchio pleading guilty again in 30 seconds.
Well, let me just tell you. I spent a lot of time investigating the Petrarca crime family,
Yep.
as you know, and Louis Manacchio is an old school Cosa Nostra, and it doesn't surprise me because he probably didn't want things revealed in his trial. That's just the way he lived. He lived by omerta. He's an old school guy.
But didn't he shatter that by admitting he was in the mob? And that was significant, don't you think?
Well, he controls that.
Yeah.
So he's one of those Rhode Island guys that will go down in the annals of history and crime. But he was. I'm glad I was able to dismantle the Petrarca crime family, because it was giving Rhode Island a black eye.
See you next week on Newsmakers.